Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for another Product Growth Leaders topic of the week. So, we talked about listening posts last time on here, and sort of following up. If we've got all these inputs coming in, right, from all these different listening posts, Steve, we need to think about how do we process these inputs. And Steve, that was your idea to put these two together. Talk to me about processing inputs and insight, because that's what we're talking about today.
Gotcha. Well, I think the thing I was pondering was, fine, I'm hearing from all these people. What do I do with it? I don't know of a tool that allows me to put all that stuff together and do anything other than highlighting with, highlighters on PDFs. So I'm not sure what the question was or what my answer was, but that's my answer.
All right. Well,
that's the call out for this podcast is I don't know what you asked and I don't know what I answered.
But we'll talk about it the rest of this hour.
Indeed.
And we've got a great panel today. Joy McCaffrey, Glenn Pride, Brian Weber, Cory Bryan. And on Monday, we put this question into the community. How do you process and make sense of all your input as a product manager? It's interesting. The first answer that came out was somebody said, I always start with objectives and key results. And I'm like, how do OKRs sort of guide your processing? But I could see it as a filter. Does this input align with an OKR? So I started seeing that. But I have to go right to it. Brian Weber, this is one of the best answers ever. It's in the Joy McCaffrey level of quality of answers. A cold beer, somewhere I won't be disturbed for at least an hour, instrumental music, blank pad of paper, and a good pen. Bonus points if you can do it outside. Talk to me about that utopia that you just described.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is looking for patterns. What are you seeing out there? One input doesn't drive a decision. You should be looking for the patterns. And for me, the best way is get all that input, whatever it is, and just think about it. I'm sure there's frameworks about trying to do stuff, but put my headphones on, or if I'm out back in my screen porch listening to the birds and stuff, and just think about it.
Just plow through it and look for patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of my highlighter answer. I use yellow for observations and red for bad stuff and green for good stuff and blue for competitive stuff. It's very analog, very old school.
Mm-hmm. Well, but it begs the question, what beer?
Right now, when I went up to Wisconsin a month or so ago, I got a bunch of Spotted Cow, which you can only get in Wisconsin. And it's a good summer beer, so that's what I'm going with right now.
All right. And what instrumental music? Are we jazz? Are we classical? Are we lo-fi hip-hop beats?
Lately, Spotify, I either use Creative Focus or Deep Focus on Spotify.
All right. Well, what type of music? Is that more like lo-fi?
The Creative Focus is classical.
Okay.
The Deep Focus is more this ambient kind of...
Sort of the massage parlor type play.
Exactly.
I don't think we call them massage parlors.
I was about to say, I'm meaning in the proper business sense, right? The spa.
And here we are 2 minutes in and we're already derailed in a serious way.
Now, Cory, you said that you thought that was the best answer before you answered.
Yes, it is. I mean, there's this think time. That's what you need. And being away from others first, I think helps me at least, because I have thoughts and I have processes and I need to form questions that I need to ask. And sometimes, at least initially, I like to do that away from everybody else and then get everybody else involved.
Okay. I like that. I was talking in our principles class about, do you like to do this type of exercise? Was it brainstorming around value proposition by yourself or as a group? And it's like, some people like to do it by themselves first and then take it to a group for feedback and iteration. Some people like to do it as a group. But I understand for this type of input, especially if you're one of the lead people to have it, process it yourself first before you try to explain it to others. Glenn Pride, you started OKRs are good, and I'm thinking you were reacting to some of those first answers that talked about OKRs. Not that it's a panacea, but Ben Franklin had a system to derive decisions, which was the output of all the input. Talk to me about how you use Ben Franklin's approach. You're on mute.
Okay.
It has to happen at least once an episode.
Yeah,
so
it does.
Thank you for getting it done earlier. Now we don't have to worry about somebody doing it.
Yeah, you're right. I just got back from the massage parlor, so I'm I may like slur and no, it just seems like I like the idea of weighting certain information because I throw such a wide net for market information, right? Or tells.
Yep.
And you might get like a cranky customer who is always cranky, and they may be saying something, but it has a pattern, but maybe it's not something I should really jump all over a little bit. And I hate to say that out loud, but it's kind of the truth about not all information is equal.
Yeah.
So that idea, I never formally put it into a spreadsheet. I wasn't never really that mechanical with it, but the idea that there is certain weights of information, and then to leap on to Brian's bandwagon of just kind of absorbing that and looking for the patterns in that. But the weight really kind of influences, what do I look at first, second, third, fourth when I start looking for patterns? Like, is this coming from a market publication? Is this coming from an analyst? Is this coming from a salesperson? And kind of a pecking order style.
So you're sort of weighting the different listening type posts.
Yeah, I guess that's the best summary of how I've always used whenever I reference good old Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. When I was reading the article you had linked to the blog or whatever it was, it made me think of Eisenhower's urgent, important principle, right? And the little 4-quadrant of some things are urgent and some things are important, and you want to focus on the urgent and important and not focus on the urgent and not important. We spend too much of our time there. And I could see how you could use that as you're filtering stuff, looking at this information saying, is this urgent and important, or urgent, not important, or not urgent and important, and neither, right?
And then I will add, I'm always attracted to an outlier. Something that just doesn't make like immediate sense or fits into one of the patterns, because that really could be something that
I always called that, and I've mentioned this before, I've been working on that everything I needed to know about product management I learned in kindergarten. And one of the things was the 5 whys, right? Why? My kids were like that. The other one is from Sesame Street, right? One of these things is not like the other. And if you can find that, I have to do it. Drucker actually said, one of the key places to look for innovation is unexpected successes and unexpected failures. And unexpected successes, one of the biggest successes I've ever had, one of the most go-to methods I've had for innovation is, let me look at my customer base and find a few of them that don't look like everybody else. Different industry, somebody who we weren't targeting, who found us. Because often they're people who are solving a problem. They're going off label, right? They're solving it themselves. And if we can understand that, we can sort of package that. So I love that, Glenn. Awesome. May Wong came in with another one of her dissertations, as she does. She's not here this week. Honestly, I have no idea. I talk to a lot of people and I read insights, which adds to my understanding of the world as well as my awareness of what I don't know. I tend to go back to the sources of information which I have found helpful in the past, but it's dangerous to rely on the same sources consistently because it skews your view. I have found it helpful to write down in a document, as Brian Weber suggested, but it's always curated subset of information with a specific target audience. The rest of it tends to be a black box. And I wish May were here because I'd like to know what type of beer she would do and what music she was listening to when she did that document. But before we get to some more answers that we got on Monday, Joy, you've been sitting here quiet and patiently. I'd love to get your take on this. How do you process and make sense? Have you heard something that resonates? Is it something different? How do you get this to one word?
I don't get it to one word. In the past, it would be an Excel spreadsheet and PowerPoint presentation and a whiteboard. At this company, for the first time, I'm using a product called Product Board, and I love it. The first time I saw it, I was completely overwhelmed. It was too much. I've used AHA, I've used User Voice in the past, but it's amazing. Every single employee at our customer has access to it. Every single employee can submit something that they've heard from a customer or a channel partner or something they saw on the web. I mean, there's just so much information coming in. That's why I was just overwhelmed in the beginning. But we can tag it, we can assign it to features, we can create new features when we see new trends coming up. All the product managers we can get together and review all of them and talk about where things are going. We can create different roadmaps, different views for different people. We haven't even opened it up to customers, which we can do, but we just don't want to get that overwhelmed yet. So, I mean, I just love it. It's been amazing. So when people say, well, our customers ask for this all the time. Well, really? Because in Product Board, I've got one customer that you've identified. And then this other one, I see 15 customers have talked about this. So it's data driven and I love it.
I think that's the first time ever I've heard anybody talk about any product management software with that much delight.
I've done like a complete 180. When I first started it, I'm like, I don't understand. You've got insights and features and portal and roadmap. Oh my. I mean, there was just so much to it. And now I'm like, how else can we use this? Let's,
that's
what
great.
more can we do with it?
Yeah.
You were going to say something, Glenn?
Yeah, I have experience with ProdPad, and I thought that was just brilliant. It got a little abused at first. People would just put little things in there that made no sense, so I had to groom that stuff out. But yeah, just being able to you can have a salesman put an annotation in there saying, "This is what I saw. This is it's just a beautiful thing to be able to start collecting that stuff."
So the key is then switching that culture. We've talked about how hard it is sometimes to get unfiltered insight. So great to hear. And I think most of the people I'm talking to who complain about it are like on the ops side, who are trying to get all the integrations to work, and they complain about that.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see the tools are evolving and past Excel and PowerPoint. Right? You a long time coming for that.
Yeah, but since May's not here and she's a fan of Dragon Boat, I gotta say May would have said Dragon Boat.
Yeah, as a tool. I've heard good things about it. I actually know somebody who just went there as a general manager, so I'll have to check their stuff out. Cory Bryan said big, visible maps. Did I do that emphasis properly?
Yes, you did.
Take the things, put them on the map. And so all I could get into my head was this meme.
Pepe.
Is it you, Cory?
Yes. This is me. He's got to be in the building somewhere, right? No, I like lo-fi beats, by the way. But
I should have made this a new poll. What beer and what music?
There you go. I like dumb tools, at least for initial exploration. I like Miro. Mural is okay, but I like note cards, sticky notes, things that help me, that don't restrict me. I feel like some of those other tools that I've used in the past have too much restriction, or they try to guide me through their process, and I don't want their process. I want my process. So I want something that just bends to my will, as is most of the time. I may come to those tools later and put things in tools later, but for right now, for this making sense phase, I just want to put everything on a map, throw it up on a wall, see how it fits together, see how to get from A to B or A to Q, whatever you want to get to. Find the questions that I want to ask. Like, okay, these three things line up here, and there's a gap here that I don't see anywhere. Why does this gap exist? What is this gap going to do? Or how does this gap do other people see this gap? Maybe I'm missing some key piece of information that I need to go back and get to. But when I have it on a map, I can draw a conclusion. I can see the flow. I can see the process, and go through. And then when I'm done that one or two times, maybe that first hour, and I'm a little buzzed, I go and grab the group and I bring them in. And I say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Or maybe I just bring one or two other people in, like peer groups, and say, hey, this is what I've come up with so far. What do you think? Where am I wrong in this? Tell me where I'm wrong, because I know I am. And they'll tell me, and we'll fill it out and we'll go, and then we'll continually refine it, and to the point where everybody says, yes, that's what we do. That's not what we want to do. I'm like, okay, that's a different conversation.
It's interesting. I've been thinking, as we've been going through this, I've been thinking in my head, how do I do it? And I relied too much on, I did a lot of that work in my head. It's almost like the Matrix and seeing everything going. And PowerPoint was my output, but I had all this, I was doing it in my head. And I'm like, God, what happens when I get older and I can't do that in my head anymore? I need to get better at writing these things down. And I'm getting better at it now, but I was thinking back to when I used to do it.
Tell you the trick that helped me with that is it's a simple concept. There's knowledge in the world and there's knowledge in your head. There's things you know and things you can look up or other people can find out.
Yeah.
The more knowledge that's in my head, the harder it is to remember.
Well, and other people can't leverage it. So
other people can't leverage it, exactly. So I like putting, as much as I can, I like putting and finding knowledge in the world and less in my head.
And I think for me, the way I've done it with clients, instead of, when I did it myself, I tended to do it in my head, right? And when I do it with clients, we use, back in the analog days, whiteboard and stickies, right? But what I used to do is we would find the direct quotes and we would organize them that way. We would do the affinity mapping and start doing it. That was a great tool that I really loved to do it that way. So I do it. But your comment made me think I just need to do a quick, lo-fi beats, and what was the beer you would be drinking or beverage of your choice?
Beverage of choice, probably some form of cappuccino.
While you're doing this, right?
Yes.
So when you're doing your processing, so lo-fi beats and cappuccino. Brian is Spotted Cow.
Spotted Cow, yep.
And probably classical music, whatever the list is on, you're looking at Spotify. Glenn, music and beverage choice.
I'm going to explore the lo-fi beats now, but I would say yacht rock and let's see, what's my beer of choice? I always go to Founders because it is a decent IPA. Okay.
Joy. And it doesn't have to be alcoholic. Cory went with cappuccino.
Well, I'll go alcohol. Goose Island beer.
Okay.
Nice.
And a classic rock.
Okay.
Nice.
Steve.
Well, let's see. My beer of choice would be Jack Daniels. And lately I'm into late 50s, early 60s jazz, before it turned into the sound of stepping on cats. It was, still melodic, still had some structure. So, definitely Miles Davis quintet.
Maynard Ferguson.
No, that's
Two?
later. Although I know Maynard Ferguson. I've got a few of his albums, which are records made of vinyl. But yeah, I'm for this kind of work, jazz without words.
Okay. And actually, I'm going to echo the jazz without words. Sometimes it's going to be a Dave Brubeck or John Batiste, his jazz stuff. Piano. Sometimes it'll be big band, depending on the mood I'm in. But we're talking like Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra and Airmen of Note and Mingus, big band type stuff.
Ooh, Mingus. That's an acquired taste right there.
It is. But it Monk, right? Something that gets my creative juices flowing. And for me, it's either a Cabernet or a Margarita. That's about my one or the other. I guess it depends on if it's winter or summer. So I digress.
But to get us back on topic, I'm reminded of the conversation we had before about customer advisory boards, in that I've had a number of occasions over the years where I'm like, you know what, we've got all this input. Would you help? And we just looked at all the requests and did some affinity mapping, and sometimes we would do Moscow, like this thing is a must have and this thing is a we don't really need it, have whatever, must have, should have, might have, could have, the other kind of have. And sometimes it was like, this is critical for us and we couldn't care less about this. And I had a number of different routines I would use, but crowdsourcing that with a interested group of customers seems like another good way of filtering through all the noise. And one other thought I had that I wanted to share was, many of our colleagues don't understand what we're talking about because they only get a fraction of what we're looking at. So the sales guy comes in and says, I talked to a guy. So that's 100% of his experience is this one problem. And he doesn't see why that doesn't go to the top of the list. Well, it's because I've had 100 other salespeople in here, each with their own one. And I'm having to figure out which 3 we can realistically do.
Completely agree. And it's interesting for me because we talk about how hard this is, and it reminds me of the hedgehog and the fox. It's sort of in the strategic concept, right? Where the fox is very analytical and knows a whole bunch of things and understands a whole bunch of things, but can't really get centered on one vision and that they can communicate and be charismatic about, where the hedgehog can. And really, when we're doing this, we need to be both. We need to have that analytical, but then bring it together to a core vision or something that is easy to communicate. And I struggled with, I would figure stuff out and I would start talking about 3 years down the road, and most people couldn't get there, right? And so what I learned is, when I processed it, I needed to only communicate and share one step out, because most people would get lost if I was trying to talk 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. It's not easy to do, and it's one of the harder things, right? It's fairly an abstract thing we ask us to do. Mm. So
one other thought that I had as you went through that, I do remember vividly coming to a company where they had like 1,000 requests, and the big, they called it a backlog, but it was a big trash can filled with stuff. And the lead developer and I went through and I said, we're going to play speed rules. Just go through and say yay or nay to any of these things. And I think the first thing we did was throw away anything that was 18 months old or older. And then we went through the rest, and it's like, we can say yes, we can say no. We can say no immediately, or yes, we need to look at this more carefully. And we went through 1,000 things and got it down to probably 50. And then went down that list and got it down to 20 that were things that were really would move the needle in terms of, oh, get ready for it, move the needle in terms of OKRs.
Yeah.
See, look at me. I'm trying to get you back to, the center.
No, but I don't think OKRs are the center for processing. I guess that's the point.
Cool. All right. I was just trying.
No, I get it. Some people answered it. Wasn't where I was going to go. But let's get to the poll. Anybody going to interrupt before I go to the poll? Okay, pause.
Anyone else, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. All right. On Wednesday, we did the poll. What is the hardest part about making sense of all your input as a product manager? The options we gave were separating the signal from the noise, our own inherent biases, finding a wall or whiteboard big enough, and just finding the time to process the insight in our final other, or it depends. Boy, I must be on a roll when it comes to writing polls lately, because we've been getting a lot of polls where nobody votes for other, it depends. So I must be getting better about writing better options to do. Steve, did you vote on this? And if so, what?
I did not. I would have chosen the first one, separating the signal from the noise.
From the noise. All right. Joy, I see that's where you came in. Any comments on that?
No, it speaks for itself.
Okay.
Joy of few words.
Yes.
So wonderful.
Glenn Pride, how did you vote? Or did you
You're
vote?
muted.
Oh, there, I got the keyboard in. I think I voted for the first one.
Separating the signal from the noise. It's a difficult, and we were just talking about how hard that can be. Brian Weber.
The time, finding enough time.
Finding enough time.
Yep. To me, if you don't have the time, you can't figure out how to separate the noise from the signal. It's part of sitting here and just listening to music is, where is that signal in this big group of noise?
I love that, and there's some of these I'm trying to craft these polls where you could actually put all the answers together to be the one macro answer. But Cory, you said signal versus noise. Mainly when you've done efforts in the past, there's a lot of information that either isn't helpful, is wrong, or doesn't move us towards a stated goal.
Yeah, although I felt like finding a wall or whiteboard big enough was a trap for me, and I didn't.
It was a trap for you.
I'm not running into that trap. But that's what it is. There's so many people with so many of their own priorities and their own things they're being measured on. And like Steve said, this is the most important thing to me. Please get it done. And your thing is BS. It doesn't matter in the larger scheme of things. It matters to you. But for the whole picture and what we're trying to do, especially with product and trying to improve our customers' lives, that one thing fails in comparison to all the other things that we could be doing. And there's so much of that busy work that people, we got to keep them busy because they're done with that thing, but now they have to go do something else. They can't just wait. They have to do something else. Mm-hmm. And so you get all this stuff on this big board and you start tearing it away and you're left with just the juicy middle that you need, and get rid of all the other crap.
So two thoughts came into my head, totally non sequitur. I remember the first time I saw a conference room that was like all whiteboards around the sides, and I thought I was in heaven, right? So that's a whiteboard big enough. But the problem is, even then, you get the do not erase on the whiteboard.
Oh yes.
So non sequitur. I don't know if you can see. I actually voted for our own inherent biases. And I went this way because too often in my career, especially when I was a product manager and a product leader, I would come into situations where legacy thinking, right? People have been around for 5-10 years and their own biases are based on knowledge that was old, and they were making decisions based on their biases. So they were looking for confirmation of what they thought instead of looking for something new. And so I'm trying out, I did it last week too, I'm trying out this new sort of contrarian, instead of trying to win every week, trying to be that contrarian that helps us, push it. But I could have gone, originally was thinking separating signal from the noise. Normally, whatever the first one is the first one I'm thinking of, so it's probably one I'm going to vote for. But I tried to go a contrarian with our own inherent biases. In the vote voted separating signal for the noise, 52%. Just finding the time to process the insight, 23%. Our own inherent biases, 17%. And actually finding our wall or whiteboard big enough. Somebody did walk into that trap, Cory. We had 5% votes there.
I love that. I'm just glad it wasn't me.
Yeah. And we're going to move forward to our first question and bringing in a fun panelist. May Wong is joining us. We've already read through your dissertation from Monday, so we don't need to go back to that. And I appreciate you voted the same as me as our own inherent biases as for the poll. So you and I, stuck together on that. But I'm going to come right in the gate. Hopefully you're warmed up. How do you use peers and other stakeholders in processing and making sense of inputs?
Usually when you talk to people and you say, hey, here's what I understand of the world, they tell you when you're wrong. They're very happy to tell you when you're wrong. Actually, sometimes if you're having a hard time getting peers or stakeholders to give you feedback, I usually just write up my understanding of the world and send it out as a first draft. And sometimes they will, and almost always, especially if there is something wrong in it, they will get back to you and say, this is completely unacceptable. And that's how you get feedback in a place where you don't get a lot of feedback.
So you have to be open to receiving that too, because some people don't want that feedback.
But if you're doing it on purpose. Why not? Right? It's different when
Yeah,
you're doing it on purpose.
I agree. Well, but it's more the mindset. I know somebody who doesn't like negative feedback.
It's not necessarily
And
negative as
is
long
he
as it's
on this call
constructive.
by any chance, Grant?
Sorry, go back to
But
you, May.
yeah, I think, but usually talking it out really helps make sense of things. And also having a conversation about a complex topic often reveals a lot more, such as knowing what you don't know.
And a ton of that happens. And Steve, there is somebody on this call thinking about, but I actually was thinking about my son. He hates negative feedback too. Uh, Brian, how about you? How do you use peers and other stakeholders in processing and making sense of inputs?
I think it's very similar to what May said. Use them for confirmation and validation, or for them to tell you that you're full of it. Um, you get all these inputs, you sit down with your drink of choice, your music, you try to put it together, and then get their feedback on what you've figured out from there. Because like you talked about before, step walking 3 years in advance, a lot of people aren't accustomed to taking all this input and try to come up with a decision
Yeah,
out of that. So that's what I'm doing. And now I just want their input on the direction I'm going.
completely get it. I love it. Joy, what about you?
Well, for me, at my current position, we offer accounting software. And as I have no accounting background, I often have no idea what they're talking about. So I have to reach out to, we actually have two accountants on the product team. They don't have product management experience, but they have accounting experience. So they're basically SMEs. And I'll
Hmm.
have to say, what is she talking about? And they'll say, oh, that's fund accounting. Okay. So I guess I'll tie that to our fund accounting request.
Yeah.
Um, but also what I found, and this may be part of bias, is I use them because I have spent so much time researching this feature, and I've talked to customers and I've talked to non-customers, and I've done surveys, and I've created this PowerPoint presentation, and I looked at the total addressable market, and I am vested. I like this. And then they'll be like, doesn't make sense to me. That's dumb.
Yeah.
Why does 75% say they like it? And so they're kind of, because they're not in product, and they didn't do any of product management, they didn't do
Yeah.
any of the work, they're like, it's dumb. Let's move on.
Glenn.
I'll go back to those tools. Those tools allow other people to chime in on all that, ideation
Like
and
product
things like
board
that.
and product plan.
Yeah,
Not the
that's
Ben
what I
Franklin
love.
thing.
Yeah, well, they could comment on that too.
Yeah.
No, that's where I like that tool, is like it's so accessible to everyone, and everyone can put their 2 cents in, um, throughout the whole process. So it's really helpful. The only thing you need is to get the discipline going for them to look at the boards and comment.
Yeah. And it seems like it would be a cultural thing to get everybody to be participating in that type of stuff. Awesome. Cory.
Generally speaking, mindset is opportunities to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I will learn something from them, whether that's something that I wanted to know, something I didn't know, or something that I need to know to make this presentation, argument, story, board, whatever, better. I'm going to learn something, or I may learn that this is not the right person to talk to,
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Okay. Steve.
I kind of took it maybe a different direction. I was thinking the joy of presenting the big scope of it all to a group. So I had a number of occasions where I was presenting to the sales team the roadmap, and somebody's like, well, where's my feature? And I'm like, it's way down the list. And they're like, no, it has to be number one. And so I would turn to the sales group and I'd say, does everyone agree with that? And, a big fight would break out. They're like, no, that's not important to me, and I would being able to use something like ProdPad or Product Board to say, look at the scope here. I've got 100 things, all of which seem like good ideas. Do you guys want to give me some guidance? And invariably there's, the Kevin, the worst salesperson in the world, who's like, screw all that noise. I want mine at the top. But then all the other salespeople are like, no, we're not doing that just because of you. Yeah. And it really, I think, showed them the difficulty of looking at 100 things and trying to do what's best by the product and the customer and the sales force all at once. So leveraging the wisdom of the crowd.
I love the wisdom of the crowd aspect. And for me, it's almost, I'm going to come on the opposite. I always had an inner circle, people who I trusted. And so I would start with, like Cory, I would sort of process stuff myself. And as we talked about earlier, often in my brain, and I would start putting my ideas down to get them together. And I would use that inner circle of people who I trusted, who they knew they could be completely and totally open and blatant with me, and I would not take offense to it. And they could ask me questions and that type of stuff. And sometimes I would use that and I'd go back and relearn, right? Find things where I need to strengthen. But I used an inner circle. And sometimes it was peers, not just in product, but in marketing and sales or strategy and that type of stuff, development. People who I could be honest with, and I would have a small group with them. This is where maybe I would bring a beer or a margarita or a wine. And May, because of Brian's answer on Monday, we did do a poll, and we need to get it from you. When you're taking your silent time to go do your stuff, to write it down on a piece of paper, what is the music you're listening to, and what is the beverage of choice? It doesn't have to be alcoholic, although all of us but Cory went with alcoholic. Music you're listening to and beverage of choice when you're doing that sort of think time.
It depends on my mood. Usually if it's a spreadsheet, I need mindless pop. So the most generic of the pop music you can think of.
K-pop.
No, like just regular American pop or
okay.
Pop, but pop, just like, because it's so mindless. It's in the background. You listen to the lyrics and you're like, this is dumb, and you go back to working.
Oh, Britney Spears.
Look, we're not naming names here.
And the beverage of choice.
Usually tea or water.
Okay, tea or water.
Asian.
It's almost sounds like a form of meditation.
Well, it almost is, Glenn. I mean, you almost have to be in that type of transit. Well, actually, my best processing time is when I'm sleeping, right? It's when I wake up at 3 a.m, because my mind finally was able to process through everything, and I wake up. So I guess my best is no music and no drinks. Cory.
I have a Costanza under my desk. I have
By the way, for that hour that we're taking to do this, it would help to do it in like a Pomodoro style, where you take 25 minutes and then you go walk the dog for 5 minutes, because you will have more thoughts and ideas in that 5-minute walk, because your brain is doing something else and you're processing. And then when you come back for the next 30 minutes, you'll fly through and do a lot better.
There is a lot of research on that, and why a lot of your epiphanies come when you're doing something mindless, because the mind actually gets to do that type of stuff. So, Brian, I made this out because I loved your answer in the beginning, but each of us has our own way of doing it. And how do we do it? Help people do it. And by the way, I'm going to try to put together a list of playlists. So if you have a playlist you use, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Music or something you've created yourself, get it to me, either in the chat, or we can do it on the platform, and I'll put together, we're going to put together a processing inputs, macro lists of playlists. And, that's, we can share our lo-fi hip hop beats and study beats and that type of stuff like Cory and I like. So, all right, enough digression again. Next question is, where do you find yourself getting lost in the inputs? Is there something that is a continual, where do you get lost when you're processing stuff? Is there a place you get lost? For me, I get lost in my biases, right? I will catch myself trending towards my inherent bias. That's why, I had voted for my own inherent bias being the hardest thing about it. But the hardest part is to get past those inherent biases. That's where I get lost in my
Right.
inputs.
This isn't an answer to your question, but I think the screenshot from this video needs to be when you ask that question, because every one of us had their thinking faces on.
It could be a meme. So, what do you think?
I'd say going down a rabbit hole chasing noise.
Yep. So, back to that poll, right? Signal versus noise. We get lost in a rabbit hole that is not relevant. I love it. Cory.
So the thing that I'm thinking of is where I see lots of information affinity mapped in a group that does not make sense. It's a very big pile of things that I can't understand or don't understand why that's so important or so many people are talking about it.
Well,
That's
is
where I get lost in a loop of why is this important and this doesn't fit any of the other stuff or it doesn't.
Which is sort of the biases thing. It goes against your inherent biases, right?
Sure.
But see, for me, where I thought you were going is sometimes people create a catch-all group, which is like all these things that didn't have anything else in common. The only thing they had in common is that there was nothing else like them. And I'm like, in that case, I can see people wasting way too much time on what I would call noise. If there's like a whole bunch of Post-it notes that don't fit any of the themes, they're noise.
I give you an example. There's a group so I was trying to make sense of things and I had this sense of what the company's mission and vision were because it was stated and repeated. And I was looking at that. And then I was looking at this pile of stuff that didn't match. This pile of stuff that didn't fit our vision or mission, but was a big pile of, hey, if we get this done, we get this deal, we get this deal, we get this deal, we get this deal that didn't match mission and vision. And I'm okay, which one wins? Which one is true?
Oh, so that's a place where OKRs could come in handy.
I think there's other things that would be more important, but
actually a coherent strategy too.
Hey, there's an idea. Let's try that.
I know, it always comes back to that. Joy, what are you thinking?
One thing I was thinking is because we're using product board, we are getting tons of input. And initially, we were all just kind of randomly going through it, reading all of them. This one applies to some of my features. This one applies to some of my features. But I requested that we start meeting weekly and review all of them together, because not so much where it went, like which feature, who owns it, but in product board, you can assign it an important score. So not important, critical, etc. And I just wanted all of us to get to a consensus. So, some people are scoring these things 3s and these are nothing, or, just reading the note, oh, the customer felt this was a 3. And so just going through and identifying how important, and I think that will help alleviate some of the bias so that not all mine are critical, and then everybody's voting theirs critical. So we're kind of coming to a consensus and an understanding of we're all on the same page.
So getting aligned in how to do it and how to use it and to make sure we're on the same page. And when you started, I was thinking something that was going to be, we've got all these inputs coming in. I've seen people get lost in the fact that they don't know where to start because there's so many inputs, right?
It was overwhelming.
It's overwhelming and you don't know where to go.
That story reminds me a lot of a case. The president had just gone through a class on how important it was to listen to customers, and apparently that came as new information. And he declared that from now on, customers would determine severity of their tech support problems. And within a week, we had a new field in the database called real severity.
Reality, yeah.
My last company had a field called severity and one called priority. And priority was what the customer put, and severity is the reality.
I like that. Glenn.
Like I said, I always look for those outliers, and sometimes I can focus way too much on an outlier, thinking there's a breakthrough right there when it might just be just like a blip.
It may just be an outlier.
Yeah. Hey, he used a screwdriver to fix an electrical socket. Yeah, so it's an electrical tool. Yeah. You know,
that sort of aligns with Brian's going down the rabbit hole, right? We may go to,
and my bias to look for those, you know, hidden things under rocks.
Yeah. No, awesome. The key is understanding where these things are can then hopefully make us be better about not getting caught in those situations in the future. All right, we're going to come to our lightning round, and we got a little time, so I'm going to give a little, you know, maybe thunder, maybe not rolling thunder, but thunder round. What is the outcome when you do not take the time to process and make sense of all your inputs? I know, I should have had Steve edit these. But what's the outcome when you don't do this? I'm going to start with Brian.
A bad product with lots of features you don't need.
I love that. A bad product with lots of features you do not need. All right, Glenn.
You kind of lose your compass, it's not coming to my brain right now.
Your North Star.
Your North Star.
All right, so a bad product with features nobody needs, and you lose your compass or North Star. Joy.
Losing out on your strategy.
Losing out on your strategy. All right. Cory.
Unhelpful chaos.
Unhelpful chaos as opposed to good chaos.
Correct.
All right. May.
They never get processed. The pile grows.
The pile grows and never gets processed. All right. Steve.
You get every single ERP product ever made. Or if you prefer something more visual, the 100 blade Swiss Army knife that doesn't do anything well, but it does everything.
We've seen that visual. And for this, I'm going to go, and it's sort of, it's close to Joy, but I'm going to say shiny object syndrome, right? You know, or tail wagging the dog. If you don't process all this to make decisions based on this, it is going to be the hippo or the salesperson's tail wagging the dog or the shiny object syndrome, which is leading stuff, not your strategy. So, what a great conversation today. And I know I say that every week. But this is one of the key roles of product management is processing all these inputs and making sense of it. And a lot of people struggle with it. And as we talk about this technical role of product management versus the strategic role of product management, I think the technical role does less of this processing of inputs and seeking and getting inputs from listening posts. They're just more reactive. And I think this is a core skill if we want to grow the strategic role of product management, being able to, get as many inputs as possible from different listening posts, of diversity of listening posts, and being able to process that into a so what, right? That can help us build our strategy or make decisions that does something aligned with our strategy. So I had a blast on this conversation. We learned a lot about people's drinking and music preferences, and we will put that the list of playlists in the community when we post this. And I want to thank everybody, Joy, Glenn, Brian, May, Cory, and of course my partner, Steve Johnson. We have a wonderful time every week. We do this. Monday, the question goes in the community. Wednesday, the poll. And on Fridays, we have these amazing calls. Thank you so much for a wonderful call. And we'll see you next week in the community.